Sometimes you have to take a stand, even if it means frustrating someone you care about. Am I the asshole for telling my son he can't visit with the grandkids unless he makes them behave? I am a 58-year-old woman with a son, Ronald, who is 32. I love him dearly, along with his 3 kids aged 7, 5, and 3. I adore my grandkids and have always looked forward to spending time with them. But lately, every time they come over, it feels more like a hurricane has blown through my house rather than a family visit. The kids are full of energy, which is great, but they also have no sense of boundaries or respect for other people's homes. Every time they visit, they're jumping on my furniture, running wild through the house, and knocking things over. On their last visit, they broke a family heirloom, a porcelain dish that had belonged to my mother. I was heartbroken, but what upset me more was that Ronald didn't seem to think it was a big deal. He just brushed it off, saying, "They're just kids." This wasn't the first time my home had been disrespected. A few months ago, the kids were playing with my collection of glass figurines, which are very dear to me. Despite me telling them multiple times not to touch them, they kept grabbing at them, and eventually one of them dropped and shattered. Ronald didn't say much, just told them to apologize, but it felt like he didn't grasp how much that collection meant to me. Another time, they were in the kitchen while I was making dinner. I stepped out for a minute, and when I came back, they had somehow gotten into the pantry and spilled flour, sugar, and rice all over the floor. It took me hours to clean up the mess. Again, Ronald just shrugged and said, "They're curious, it happens." The final straw for me was during a family barbecue in the backyard. I had spent the morning setting up everything nicely, even planting some new flowers in my garden. The kids, within minutes of arriving, were running through the garden, trampling the flowers I had just planted. I asked Ronald to have them play in another area, but they kept coming back to the garden, pulling up plants and making a mess. By the end of the day, my garden looked like it had been dug up by wild animals. After that last visit, when they broke the dish and left my living room looking like a tornado hit it, I finally reached my breaking point. I told Ronald that while I love having them over, I just can't handle the chaos anymore. I said that unless he's willing to make them behave and show some respect for my home, I don't want him bringing the kids over anymore. Ronald was furious. He accused me of being a bad grandmother and said I was just too old and cranky to handle having kids around. He said I was expecting too much from them, and that if I wanted to see my grandkids, I'd have to accept them as they are. Now, I feel terrible because I don't want to alienate my son or miss out on spending time with my grandkids. But at the same time, I feel like I'm within my rights to expect a certain level of respect for my home. I've worked hard to make it a nice place, and it's not fair that every visit ends with me cleaning up a huge mess and feeling stressed out. So, am I the asshole for telling my son not to visit with the grandkids unless he's willing to make them behave? Or am I just being an unreasonable grandmother who's out of touch with what kids are like these days?